For strong men to rule the world, a free press can never rule the day. Tonight, an alarming report on media freedom in an age where the truth is now fake and telling the truth turns you into a target. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. This is The Day.
They're very dishonest people. In fact, in covering my comments, the dishonest media did not explain that I called the fake news the enemy of the people, the fake news.
The campaign rhetoric was tarnished by some senior officials, equating no supporters with terrorist sympathizers.
The point is that a journalist was deprived of his freedom for 14 days for doing his job in a friendly country.
One-side dominance in the coverage and restriction of the media reduces voter access to a plurality of views.
I was a victim of institutional violence because I feel it's illegal. What happened to me was illegal.
And the leaks are absolutely real. The news is fake.
The media's got a job to do.
Fortunately, today I've returned home. And my thoughts go out to all those who are imprisoned in general. And to those journalists who are being held in conditions far worse than mine.
Also tonight, almost 50,000. That's the crackdown arrest tally in Turkey. Overnight, another 1,000 were added to the list. That story coming up in about 12 minutes. We begin the day by placing a bullseye right between my eyes. Journalists, just like me, all around the world, are facing attacks like never before for simply doing our job. And living and working in a democracy is no longer the safeguard that it used to be. Now, these are some of the disturbing revelations in the 2017 World Press Freedom Index, which was published today by Reporters Without Borders. Now, the NGO describes a global media approaching a tipping point where politicians' hateful rhetoric, the repressive laws that they pass, and the fists that their followers raise are all eroding freedom of the press like we've never seen before. Let's take you through this index. I mean, it is not dark everywhere, of course. At the top of the index is the freest place in the world for journalists. Norway, no big surprise there. At the bottom of the index, the most restrictive country for journalists, no prizes if you guessed. Yep, North Korea. Well, this year's report also speaks to the power of words, words that have become weapons. It slams the ugly rhetoric that was used by then-candidate Donald Trump, saying once the U.S. president begins attacking the media, well, the rest of the world begins to follow suit. And consider the rise of populist politicians and their open hostility towards reporters. The leader of Italy's five-star movement, Beppe Grillo, he dismisses journalists. He calls them a tiresome caste. He wants, get this, a people's jury to determine the truth of reports in the media. And then there's the growing threat of surveillance everywhere. Now, even here in Germany, which is known for its strict data protection laws, new legislation was passed last year which extends the power of the Secret Service in this country to watch journalists as well as regular citizens with no exceptions. Well, I'm joined here at the big table by Christian Mier from Reporters Without Borders here in Germany. It's good to have you back on the show, Christian. So let's look at this index. The threat to our profession, it has shifted and it's also spreading. But this index shows us that the threat now is right here at home in democracies.
Yeah, I think that's actually the most worrying thing, and I think that's where we really are at a tipping point if we talk about democracy. And I think the most worrying thing probably is that it's not always like in the US already a real threat, but like people like Donald Trump are actually giving a symbol and for other dictators or dictators in authoritarian regimes. And I think that's the most problematic thing. And if we talk about Germany, where just recently has been discussed a fake news law, and if this law is discussed in Belarus and used in Belarus as an example for imprisoning journalists, I think there we see the problem why Germany and other democracies have to be have to actually have to be better.
You have to be better, and also have to be vigilant too about protecting press freedoms. The U.S. and the U.K. have become, if you look at this index, have become almost breeding grounds for resentments against reporters, especially thanks to the words of Donald Trump. I want to take a listen to this exchange that Trump had at a press conference earlier this year.
And the leaks are absolutely real. The news is fake.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Where are you from?
BBC.
Good. Here's another beauty.
It's a good line. Impartial, free and fair.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. President.
Just like CNN, right?
I mean, there you have the most powerful man in the world declaring open season on journalists, and he's doing that in public for the whole world to see.
Yeah, I think that's actually the problem. I think it's not a problem that there's real threats, because I think these people can work freely and they are free to criticize Donald Trump. But as I said earlier, I think if other governors take this as an example, that is really a real threat. And of course, it's a problem if Donald Trump tries actually to question credibility of journalism and journalists. But I think the advantage in democracies that journalists still have the freedom actually to fight back if we tell this just by doing their job, which is criticizing this behavior.
I mean, that is an important point. I mean, if you criticize the U.S. president, you don't have to worry about being put in jail or being shot if you go out on the street, which we can't say that is the case for all journalists around the world. I mean, that's a very important point. I mentioned strong men rulers at the top of the show. They are in countries such as Turkey. And Turkey really has become a dark place for reporters, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's, I think, one of the darkest places all over the world. Actually, it has taken over the crowd, if one can say so, from Egypt and China as a country imprisoning the most journalists. There are almost 150 journalists currently imprisoned. I think that's really a problem. And that's why Turkey, as a country which still wants to join the EU, I think is right now not prepared at all for joining the European Union.
And let me ask you, Christian, did you see this coming too? I mean, I know you work with Reporters Without Borders here in Germany, but these trends, was there a trend with Turkey, or did this kind of creep up on us quickly?
Well, it's not that quickly. Of course, it was a dynamic since a failed coup d'etat last year in Turkey. But at Reporters Without Borders, we are, I would say, much more worried about Turkey since 2 years, I would say, since the elections, where the results of the elections weren't like Erdogan wanted the election results. And since then, I would say the crackdown in the independent media, independent journalism started. And we see this at our assistance desk here at Reporters Without Borders in Berlin as well. Since then, the requests from journalists from Turkey actually increased. And I think there you see a tipping point.
What about Russia?
Well, Russia is another sad story, I would say. I think Russia is, I would say, a stable country, stable really down at our index in press freedom, because there are almost no independent media. There's a high level of censorship. So in Russia, there's no direct censorship anymore needed, because people are quiet, people left the country.
Can we talk about Putin having a total grip on the media in his country?
Unfortunately, yes, he was quite successful with his job. I think most of the journalists who still want to work as independent journalists left the countries, have been killed in the 2000s. We now don't have any more killings all over the country like we had in the 2000s. And yeah, he was successful with his mission somehow.
Christian, this index in this report, it mentions a tipping point for media freedom around the world. How do you see this moving forward?
Well, I think on the short-term view, I think we have to be much more outspoken as an organization, even here in Western democracies. We have to be much more clear, reminding our politicians here that they are giving bad symbols for these dictators. And if we see these examples, like this example from Belarus, which I mentioned, this should be an alarming signal if a law from Germany is used in a dictatorship like Belarus for imprisoning journalists. I think this should be a point where every German politician should think and should think seriously about what they are doing.
And the upcoming German election in September, will that be a watershed event for press freedom or for the role model of freedom of the press?
Well, let's see. I think to some extent, I think it depends a bit how the AfD party gets into parliament or not, because right now the AfD party somehow is pressurizing the other parties as well with this populist style of doing politics and how to deal with media. And if they will join the parliament, I think it will be critical as well if they will keep on dominating the discourse somehow. And let's see.
Yeah, there'll be a lot to talk about between now and September for sure. Christian Mier with Reporters Without Borders here in Germany. Christian, as always, thank you very much, and we appreciate your time and the work that you do. Thank you.